Well, one of the areas that you and I think, depart from our colleagues, our Republican colleagues, is a concern over foreign policy. I have a big concern over the fact that we've sent so many people into war, and we've lost so many of our people in a war that's not declared, and in a war that doesn't seem to have any end in sight.
Yeah. No, and that's been going on for a long time. My ideas on that were formulated from the time I was in high school, because it was that time I remember the Korean War broke out, and one of my teachers was called back up. He had been in World War II, went over to Korea and died, and then a neighbor person's boy died in Vietnam, and I was in the military during the 60s. But during all this period of time, I kept thinking about this, and then studying history and the Constitution, and who's responsible for going to war, and why don't we win these wars, and why are we still in Korea. It was on and on, that I just decided that you know, we are way off track on this, and I think the American people are going to have to realize that we can't do it just for practical reasons. We can't run the world. Mm-hmm. We don't have the authority to run the world. All it does is get more people angry at us, and we're bankrupt, and we can't afford it. We're doing to ourselves what the Roman Empire did. You know, they finally destroyed themselves. The Soviets did it to them. The British did it too. They finally ruined their system by believing that they can run the world. And our goal ought to be to preserve liberty for American citizens. And we should influence the world. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we should aim for, is if we have a good system, people will want to emulate it. But if we say we are the greatest system, we are the greatest people, and we have democracy, we're going to make you do it exactly as we do. We're going to go over there and have an election in Baghdad. And they have elections, but you know, what do they mean?
Well, we don't even understand our own history, because we talk about preserving democracy, not a republic, but democracy, if you will. And didn't you say that, I think in, was it in Iraq, that we're building an embassy the size of Vatican City? Is that correct?
Baghdad is as big as the Vatican, maybe an acre or two short, but it's huge. But they did one in Kabul, and why would we want one in London?
Well, exactly, but I find myself thinking that if some other foreign country were to come into our country and build something that size, how would we think that they weren't there to do more than just, you know?
You know, that approach is the right way, and I talk about that a lot in foreign policy. You know, people say, well, we need to do this, we need to do this, and I try to get them to think about a golden rule in foreign policy. Why don't you think about it, how would you react if somebody did that to us? What if the Chinese came into the Gulf of Mexico and said, well, we're protecting our oil, or put a base in Texas, or who knows, in Idaho, and say, oh yeah, we're here and we're going to force ourselves upon you. Or lobbing missiles into countries, sovereign countries. I mean, we occupy Afghanistan, we occupy Iraq, we're lobbing bombs into Pakistan, we're lobbing bombs into Yemen and Somalia. We're involved in Somalia, even though they don't admit that. We're involved in so much. We have over 700 bases around the world. We're in 135 countries. And if for no other reasons, conservatives should say, hey, maybe we're going to go broke. Maybe the answer is, instead of the two factions in Washington saying, oh, you want the money for this one, and we want money for this, we'll raise welfare, we'll raise warfare. Why don't they get together and say, you know what, why don't we close a couple bit? Why don't we come home from Korea, at the same time we'll cut back on something here at home and have a balanced budget. But see, that challenges the whole economic ethic that they have about Keynesianism, is that spending is crucial to get back on our feet again. Mm-hmm. So they don't care.
So how have you spent so many years in Washington and remained such a principled man and remained such a great defender of liberty and of the Constitution?
How do I do it? I don't know. I mean, there are days it's rather annoying at times. Some people say, don't you get frustrated? I don't really describe it as frustration because I never expected a whole lot. You know, I figured we weren't far enough along for me to go there and give a speech and say, oh, you guys are going to listen to me. I understood how well ingrained all these bad ideas were. So I went with the idea of just looking for a place to expose some ideas I thought were correct. They're not my ideas. They're the ideas of the founders. They're old ideas. They're biblical ideas. They're economic ideas. And that was my whole goal. So in some ways, instead of getting frustrated, I feel even more excited because they're paying more attention now than I ever dreamed they would. I thought, you know, even 2-3 years ago, I figured, well, after time, you know, I've been here a while, I've tried to set a standard and set a record and vote a certain way, and maybe someday, 10, 15, 20 years, somebody will look and say, well, maybe his voting was the right thing to do. So I never thought that there would be any attention given to me. So I, in some ways, think that more has happened than I ever believed.
Oh, well,
so.
I must tell you that I've admired the way that you've stood on principle, and also the fact that you always say it's about the message. You really take a humble approach, and maybe that's why you've been able to keep such a positive attitude and not get so beaten down, because you realize it's the message and you don't take it as personally as some might.
Because people have described that my shortcomings, I say, well, that's true, but my message is no shortcomings in the message, because it's another message. I didn't invent it, you know. So.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say something that our friend Ralph Smead would want us to say, and that is the fact that you are definitely a non-statist. So you've held true to the limited constitutional government concept. Right. Congressman Paul, if you could have a word with all of your supporters in Idaho, and there are plenty of us here, what would you say to encourage us to continue?
I would say keep up the good work, because I know this is one of the best states for freedom ideas that I know of. So I think that's the only way it can be done. It's the grassroots. You've done a great job here. The numbers are growing. The vehicles available. The organizations are available. The internet's available. And it's so much easier today than it was in the 1950s when I was searching and begging and pleading to find the information. So I would say people ought to ask a lot of times, what should I do? Should I become a Republican? Should I be an independent? Should I be a libertarian? Should I do this? I say, do what you want to do. You know, what you want to do, it might be different. You do a TV show and other things. You've run for office. And I've run for office and have had relative success. So you might support candidates. You might raise money. You might be a candidate yourself. You might become a teacher. You might go into journalism. It's all kinds of things. But the most important thing is something Leonard Read taught me from the Foundation for Economic Education. He says, get informed. Get informed and try to present your views in a way that people will feel comfortable with. You cannot change people's mind by wringing their neck, and you do this. So to me, it's education and then making yourself available. Go out and there'll be a job for you.
Then truth will out, right?
Right.
Thank you so much for being on the program.
Good to be with you.
I'm Elizabeth Allen Hodge. The program is Legislative Watch.